You make decent money, you keep extra cash, you are trying very hard not to make a stupid move. And the strong dollar you read as good news may be part of what makes your next mortgage payment, your refinance options, and your portfolio feel tighter instead of safer. The Federal Reserve's broad dollar index recently stood at 120.5518. That is not just a market detail. That can be a pressure signal. This is not about some distant foreign problem. This is about the financial plumbing above your life and how it can reach your front door. Drop a comment. Have you delayed buying a house, changing jobs, or investing because cash feels safer right now? I will read every single one. Before we go further, I want to be clear with you. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and this video is for educational purposes only. So please speak with a qualified financial professional before making any major financial decision. We are discussing historical data and general scenarios, and past investment returns do not guarantee future results. And with that said, let's talk about what this feels like inside a real household before anyone ever notices the macro story. It does not look dramatic from the outside. It looks like competence. A household earning somewhere between $90,000 and $160,000 a year, a checking account that is not empty, a 401k that exists, a savings balance that would look responsible to almost anyone scrolling past it, the kind of life that, on paper, should feel stable. And yet the day begins early. 6:42 in the morning, kitchen light on, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, and the quiet ritual begins again. Open the bank app, check the balance, close it, open the mortgage calculator, enter a different down payment, close it, reopen the home listing you saved 3 weeks ago, $400,000, then $398,000, maybe something smaller, close that too. At lunch, the loop repeats. A quick glance at the portfolio because the market is red again. Not a full review, just a glance. Enough to feel the stomach tighten, not enough to change anything. Then back to work, back to the meeting, back to sounding normal. Night is quieter, which somehow makes the pressure heavier because the fear is not dramatic financial collapse. It is subtler than that, a quieter tension, the modern pain of appearing fine on paper while feeling fragile in practice. The realization that the median household income in the United States sits around $83,730. Yet even earning more than that does not automatically create peace. That is the pain almost nobody says out loud. I make good money. Why do I still feel like one bad number could rearrange my month? Not destroy it, not ruin it, just quietly rearrange it. A higher rate quote, a larger repair bill, a market drop at the wrong moment. A housing payment that moves from uncomfortable to defining. The median existing home price in the United States recently hovered near $398,000. That is not a luxury property, that is the middle of the market. And the middle now asks for a level of income stability, savings, and margin that many households can imitate for a few months but cannot maintain for a decade. And this part matters most. This is not a consumer disaster story. This is not someone trying to look rich online. This is restraint under pressure. This is the browser tab for the home you never schedule a tour for. The investment contribution, you pause for a couple of months. The job you do not leave because the timing feels thin. Beneath all of it runs a quiet internal sentence. I am not being reckless. I am being careful. And that is exactly why this trap works. Because it does not capture foolish people first. It captures conscientious people. People trying to protect their future. People doing the responsible thing. People who believe caution alone would keep the system from reaching them. What makes this uncomfortable is that the pressure does not begin in your neighborhood. It begins in the global plumbing. The United States dollar is not just the currency Americans spend at grocery stores and gas stations. It is the currency much of the world borrows in, hedges in, and relies on for stability. When governments, corporations, and banks around the world need safety, they often turn to dollars. When uncertainty rises, that demand usually rises as well. Which means when the dollar becomes stronger, it does not only signal strength, it can also signal stress somewhere else. Roughly 58% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in United States dollars. That means the majority of financial safety buffers maintained by governments around the world are tied to the same currency that helps determine the mortgage rate on your future home. Now add another layer. Lower and middle income countries collectively carry about $8.9 trillion in external debt. Much of that debt is denominated in dollars. When the dollar strengthens, the real burden of paying that debt increases in their local currencies. Payments become harder, liquidity tightens, investors become cautious, capital begins to move. In one recent year alone, net capital outflows from these economies reached roughly $741 billion. Money leaving, pressure building, credit conditions tightening across multiple markets, risk appetite shrinks, credit spreads widen, financial conditions tighten. Federal Reserve research has shown that appreciation in the United States dollar is associated with reduced investor risk tolerance and tighter domestic financial conditions. This is the moment most people miss, because the headlines often frame a strong dollar as a symbol of national strength. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it is also a signal of stress moving through the system. And when that stress moves, it does not land first on government policy or corporate earnings. It lands on households, on mortgage quotes that move half a percentage point higher, on lending standards that tighten quietly, on the debt-to-income ratios lenders use to decide whether a home remains affordable. The subtle shift between technically possible and comfortably sustainable. So the next time someone tells you the dollar is strong, the real question is not whether that sounds good. The real question is whether you are watching a victory or watching the financial plumbing tighten above your life. Now slow everything down, because this is where the illusion meets arithmetic. Start with the number that sounds abstract on the news. The median existing home price in the United States recently sat around $398,000. For many households, entering that home begins with a down payment. 20% down on $398,000 is $79,600. That leaves roughly $318,400 financed through a mortgage. Imagine that loan at 6% interest on a 30-year mortgage. The monthly payment lands around $1,900 before taxes and insurance. Not comfortable, but manageable. Now change only one variable. The interest rate rises from 6% to 7%. Nothing else changes. The same house, the same income, the same neighborhood, but the payment moves to roughly $2,100 per month. The difference appears small when someone says it quickly. About $209 more every month. That is the lie. $200 a month does not feel life-changing. It sounds like a minor adjustment. A dinner out, a few subscriptions, a small inefficiency in the monthly budget. But $209 every month is not a lifestyle expense. It is structural. Over 12 months, that difference becomes roughly $2,500. That is the repair fund that never forms. That is the investment contribution that quietly disappears. Stretch that difference across 10 years. Those extra payments add up to more than $25,000 leaving the household, purely because the rate moved 1 point higher. But the real cost is not the cash that leaves. It is the money that never had the chance to grow. If that same $209 each month had been invested at roughly 4.12%, a return similar to the 10-year Treasury benchmark, the 10-year opportunity cost becomes roughly $31,022. $31,000. The invisible cost of 1 percentage point in financing conditions. Extend that difference across 20 years. Allow that money to compound instead of vanish. The lost future value becomes approximately $77,828. $77,000, not from reckless spending, not from luxury upgrades, from a single shift in financing conditions that many people describe as only about $200 more per month. Now, to be fair, there are situations where this calculation looks different. Households with strong income stability, deep savings reserves, minimal competing debt, and a long-term housing horizon can still make higher rate purchases work. Housing stability can carry real financial and emotional value. But for households operating close to their margin, the sensitivity is brutal. $200 is not a budgeting issue. It is a margin issue. Because what looks like $209 per month quietly becomes more than $50,000 of additional direct outflow over time and roughly $77,000 in lost future value over 20 years. That is not a rate difference. That is a life shape difference. Up to this point, the story still sounds like ordinary economics. Rates move, housing becomes expensive, life tightens, but there is a hidden mechanism underneath it. When the dollar strengthens, the story does not end at currency charts. Many governments, corporations, and financial institutions borrow in United States dollars. When the dollar rises in value, the real burden of repaying those obligations increases. That pressure does not remain overseas. Investors become cautious, liquidity shifts, capital moves toward perceived safety. Those movements ripple back into the United States financial system. Federal Reserve research shows that appreciation in the dollar can reduce investor risk appetite and tighten domestic financial conditions. That is the spillback effect. Stress that begins abroad flows back into the United States through financial channels. The Federal Reserve tracks financial pressure through something called a financial conditions index. It measures the combined behavior of several variables such as interest rates, credit spreads, equity markets, and the broad dollar index. Yes, the strength of the dollar itself is one of the signals used in measuring financial pressure, which means a strong dollar headline can simultaneously represent national strength and a tightening force within domestic financial conditions. This does not mean the economy is collapsing. It means the plumbing is under pressure. Mortgage lenders grow cautious. Credit becomes more selective. Financing conditions that seemed manageable months earlier begin demanding stronger income, deeper savings, and lower risk. From the outside, nothing has changed. The same house, the same job, the same life, but the invisible machinery above it has shifted just enough that the margin disappears. Once you see that mechanism clearly, something changes. The story stops being about predicting the dollar. It becomes about testing whether your household survives if the system tightens again. Call it the strong dollar spillback test. Step 1 is cash flow. Take the $209 monthly difference we just walked through. Ask a simple question. If that number appeared tomorrow, would it quietly fit into your budget? Or would it erase the margin that makes your life stable? If it erases the margin, the problem is not the rate environment. The problem is the structure of the household cash flow. Step 2 is the portfolio. Markets fall. A diversified portfolio can drop 20% in a difficult year and still function normally. But the real question is not whether markets fall. The real question is whether you would be forced to sell when they do. If an emergency forces you to liquidate investments during a downturn, the portfolio is not protection. It is delayed vulnerability. Step 3 is housing. Return to the mortgage example. 1 percentage point created roughly $209 in monthly pressure. Now imagine the same housing plan facing tighter credit standards, slightly higher rates, slightly stricter debt-to-income limits. If that shift destroys the plan entirely, the problem was never the house. The problem was the fragility supporting it. The goal is not perfect economic forecasting. The goal is building a household that survives unfavorable conditions. Cash flow with breathing room, investments that remain untouched during stress, housing decisions that survive worse financing conditions. Financial peace rarely looks the way people imagine. It is not luxury. It is not sudden retirement. Peace is quieter. It is opening a mortgage quote and realizing the number is higher than expected while knowing the month will still hold together. It is receiving a repair estimate without feeling your stomach drop. It is watching a red market day and knowing nothing in your life must change tomorrow. That is what margin buys. Breathing room, the ability to decline a bad loan, the freedom to delay a rushed home purchase, the confidence to continue investing even when headlines become loud. Most people believe financial strength means predicting the future. It does not. It means building a structure strong enough to survive a future you cannot predict. And if this conversation showed how something as abstract as a strong dollar can quietly remove options from a household, the next step becomes obvious. The next step is learning how to build a household balance sheet that keeps those options alive. Because when the system tightens again, the families who sleep well will not be the ones who predicted the timing. They will be the ones who built their financial lives strong enough that the timing stopped mattering.